So, okay. Today we are meeting with Donna Braquet. Donna is actually a subject librarian here at UT. Not our subjects, but some subjects like biology, sociology, gender and sexuality studies, and child and family studies. And I think today we're specifically going to talk about the Rainbow Library. If you live in the Knoxville area, you've maybe heard of it or like come across it at South Press, for example. I know I've checked out a book from Rainbow Library at South Press just like on a whim. And I don't know if Donna wants to speak about specifically also what's it called? Voices Out Loud. That project has sounded really cool. I've heard about it from Pat Brooks, who I think you collaborated with on it, or collaborate with. It's not over. But yeah, just you may proceed.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for having me today. I love talking about both of these projects, and I hope that y'all might have questions. And I love talking with SIS students, and you all have done a great job with all the programming this year. So kudos. All right, so Knoxville Rainbow Library. Our tagline is "Check us out, get it, ha!" And we started in October 2020. If y'all can think back to that time, it was a really weird time, right? I was like, I think all of us were kind of like just knocked off our feet, right? And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, I think at that time UT was still all remote, and like I don't do well at home just by myself. And so I was like, I need to, like, what can I be doing with all this time that we have, right? And so a few things just all kind of came together all at the same time. I was on the Over the Rainbow committee at ALA in the Rainbow Roundtable. And in that committee, we looked at basically all fiction and nonfiction books that were published in a year, and and picked the best ones, or the things that we thought were best. And then also South Press opened, which is a trans-owned coffee shop. They opened in 2020. And so all this kind of came together. I asked Jocelyn, like, hey, would it be okay if we had a little library in there? And she was like, awesome, yes. And so here's a picture of the first little bookshelf that we had. And again, like, all of these books were things that were sent to me for free just for being on that ALA committee. So if you're ever looking for a committee, it's turned out to be a really great one. I love Rainbow Roundtable. All right. I don't know if y'all were here. A lot of y'all aren't local, but that building that South Press was part of burned down, and South Press was not burned down, but they ended up just demolishing the entire building because it wasn't safe. But luckily, they moved into a new building, which was just right next door. And I mean, it must be 5 times the size of the original building. And so we were able to sort of expand, and you can see we went from that little tiny sort of like half shelf to 2 big bookcases. And this is Sarah. She was a SIS student from a few years back. So now we currently have 2 tall bookcases, the original bookcase, and a total of 314 books there. And then we've had some really exciting things happen also. Our community, I feel, is just like really flourishing in the past few years. Bryant's Bridge is a transitional home for LGBTQ young adults who need a place to sort of get on their feet. And so they contacted me, and they were like, hey, look at these great bookshelves we have in our new home. Like we would love to have you, expand your library here. So did that, and they're awesome over there, and they have 154 books there now. And then most recently, just this past February, I talked with the folks at Knox Pride Center, and they were like, yeah, like that would be really cool. So they have 179 books there, and soon we'll be adding a DVD shelf as well. So sort of all of these really cool collaborations coming together throughout the community, making LGBT books more accessible to everyone. All right, so just a little bit about sort of starting something new. Originally, the name was the Little Free LGBT Library, kind of going off that sort of, I guess, movement. I don't know if it's kind of dwindling now, but it was big for a while. But after doing that, I kind of ran into a few problems that I saw. With the Little Free sort of naming, people thought that it was like take a book, leave a book, or just like take a book, never bring it back kind of a thing. And also sometimes I think like little free libraries just end up being like whatever people happen to drop by or bring, and there's sort of like no intentionality behind it. Some of them are, I think, but and but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't confusing users with because I am like very intentional about the books that go in, and I would like we do want them back so that other people could use them, right? And then the other thing wrong with this original name was like the eternal problem with naming anything in the LGBTQ plus IATS community. And as you know, like we're very inclusive, so we want to make sure everyone's there, but then it gets very cumbersome, right? So some of the things that I did, again, I changed it to, Rainbow Library. We thought about Pride Library, but we thought like that might be confused with like the Pride Center on campus or the Pride Center in Knoxville. And then also sort of like setting up the expectation that it's like a regular library where you check things out and you return them. And Rainbow is sort of like more symbolic than descriptive in having to list out all the particular people. I always kind of go back to these rules of librarianship. I hope that they still teach these in library school. In that, like books are for use. Everyone deserves to have. I should add every person deserves their book. And because early on I was like, well, we kind of work on the honor system, right? Like, what if I don't get some of these books back? And so I just kind of kept reminding myself, like, that happens in all libraries. Like, all libraries don't get some books back, and I would rather lose some books and have people read them, and we'll kind of like see how it goes, right? But over the years that we've been open, it really has been very few books that like didn't get returned. So I'm fine with that. And then just sort of a personal philosophy on creating like an LGBT library. I believe that queer books save lives, and that queer people deserve to see themselves in books and in all types of media and in the world. And that this library, I'm hoping, combats the deliberate government censorship that's going on. And it's only ramped up really in the past few years. It's gotten worse. And then also just remove barriers of cost and access. So books aren't cheap, right? And so not everyone in our community has access through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever. Our public libraries don't always have the greatest selection of LGBTQ books. And then also sort of access as far as some people might be afraid to go up to a librarian and ask for an LGBT book, where they might be afraid to check it out because they might think who's going to have access to my records, or maybe my parents will find out. And so, if people happen to get to one of these 3 locations, they're able to have access to all of these books without those concerns. Some of the outreach that we do is, this is us at the first Southside Pride. I think it's called, what is it called now? I can't think of it right now, but they're having another one this year, which is really cool. So, no Pride, yeah, very cool, thank you. And let's see, we are a sponsor of this really cool punk and drag hootenanny at the end of the month. So they have tons of sponsors, and so we're one of the sponsors. We did things like hold an event to write postcards to legislators to ask them not to pass hateful legislation. And then coming up this week and next week, if anybody's in town, we're making posters for welcoming posters for the Rainbow Camp for when those families come in town to welcome them and to make them feel affirmed. And so I feel like those are kinds of things that, oh, and this is me up here. I was providing masks. This was sort of during the height of the pandemic, and providing masks to folks. And so those are kind of things that I feel like, quote, regular libraries would do. And so I try to do a variety of those things. As far as collection scope, I really try to keep it tightly to LGBTQ specific, nonfiction and fiction. I feel like there are a lot of other places for books that aren't like that. And so we have a finite amount of space. And so I'd really try to keep that tightly, although sometimes, things overlap. So selectively, I might add something for women's studies, feminist studies, maybe gay icons like Madonna, or someone who's not specifically gay, but is important in the queer community, and selectively like erotic literature. I do exclude, like I don't really include magazines, anything in poor condition, pornography, or anything that's like anti-LGBT or turfy. I feel like all of those things, again, like have various places out there in the world, and they don't belong in our library, which is trying to be affirming and inclusive. We do have YA and children's, adult and poetry. We have a subscription to Sinister Wisdom Literary Journal, which is like the longest published lesbian cultural arts journal, which is really cool. And a few DVDs that have been donated throughout the years. And if y'all have questions, y'all can just like put them in chat. I'd be happy to do that, or you can hold them to the end. I'm a really informal presenter, so. And then collection building and the budget. Some of the ways that I've found a way to make this possible is, again, sort of my membership on those committees, which send us books for free, like hundreds of them, which is really nice. The Metropolitan Community Church, which is a gay church here in Knoxville, got a humongous donation from a gentleman who passed away. So a lot of his books and DVDs were added to the collection, and then things that didn't fit our collection, we were able to like sell them to McKay's for credit so that we can buy things that do fit the collection. We get community donations. Most of the time they fit the criteria and scope. Sometimes they don't. And if they don't, again, I just kind of go to McKay's and trade it in for something that we can use. I got an activist award from ALA in 2020. So I used part of that stipend. I know, I was like, I want an award from ALA. And they're like, oh, we're not having the conference this year. It was virtual that year, but it was very cool to be nominated and to win it. So that money went towards the library. I teach a 129, which is like a freshman seminar course every year. So the stipend for that I get goes towards buying books and things like that, supplies that I need for the library. I'm on Rainbow Roundtable committee, again, For these 2 years, it's a nonfiction committee this time. And the first time it was fiction and nonfiction. And we have an Amazon wish list set up for anybody who wants to purchase things. And then, like I think most projects, me and my checkbook, like, you know, I'm always buying things for the library. So, and that's fine. I don't really use a checkbook anymore. I should say like check card or whatever. But you know what I mean. All right. So a few things about sort of the nerdy librarian stuff, which I hope that y'all get a kick out of. So I use sort of like these old school like card and pocket in the back. I don't even know. I don't guess they don't even use those in schools and in libraries anymore. Sometimes maybe. And then I added like a QR code and a Google form, which has been a blessing because sometimes the writing that people would, it was hard to decipher. So if they type it out in the form, it's a lot easier. I use Library Thing app to add the books to the collection. And it's really cool. They just have like that little scanner. You just scan the barcode and it adds it to your collection. And then Library Thing has a service called Tiny Cat for sort of personal and small libraries. And so it works in conjunction with Library Thing and Tiny Cat. And if we have time, I'll show you the back end of that. It's really nerdy and cool, but you can run reports, you can keep track of circulation, all kinds of cool stuff. Oh, let me go back. So, and the subscription for Tiny Cat is $36 a year if you have under 1,000 items. So that's really doable. And then we had a really great thing happen this year. We went over 1,000 books. So it's only $72 a year. And that's for up to 5,000 books. So I think that will take us a while to get up. I'll have to like use an entire room in my house soon for that, but it's a good problem to have. So, but it's very, if you have a small library or organization, it's very affordable. So originally, I was working with an SIS student practicum, and we were thinking up like these really grand ways to organize everything, right? And we were like, we'll make it by genre, and then like by the topic or the identities involved in the book, and we'll have like these stickers, and like we'll put like the rainbow flag for one, or like the lesbian flag or the trans flag on the book, and then we'll have like another color code for like the genre. And so we sat down and we tried to do that, and it got very complicated like very quickly. And like also like some of the books had like 4 stickers on them, right? And so where we'd sit there and be like, well, this is kind of like it kind of is about like trans people, but it's more about non-binary people. And like, so the decisions about like how to categorize things got kind of out of hand. And we thought maybe, since it's mostly a browsing collection, people could just pull the book off the shelf and read the description and kind of see what the book is about. So then we kind of scaled back our goals and just kind of like organized them broadly by like fiction, nonfiction, memoir, and had like little shelf labels for those. But currently what I decided to do, because like with shuffling the books and everything, sometimes things would get out of place. So I currently have like a tiny dot on each book spine, just for like fiction, nonfiction, poetry, graphic novel, and memoir. So that kind of helps us keep things in order. This is sort of the Tiny Cat catalog. And you can see like it tells patrons if things are checked out, it tells them the location. I've used the tags to sort of denote who donated it. I just kind of put initials in there for that. You can see if it's available. And then if you click on that, you get a larger record. with, you know, descriptions and reviews and stuff like that. So you can at least see which book is in which location. Like we haven't gone as far as to do like call numbers and like find things in that order or anything like that, but with sort of a smallish collection, you know, people can browse. If they're looking for a particular book, they can kind of like browse that section and probably find it pretty quickly. Some of the things that we've been involved with are Rainbow Camp. So the folks that hold that, which is like, again, like they welcome people from all around the state, LGBT kids and their families. And so they've checked out like a large portion of our children's books to have there for those kiddos and their families. So that's really cool partnership. So these are some of the top books that have been checked out. The number one book that's been checked out the most is They, Them, Their. It's been checked out 6 times. And then sort of these books here have been checked out 5 times at least. And there's a little bit, like with anything, there's a little bit of error because people could read books and not check them out. People could just look at it while they're there. I mean, but overall, this kind of gives me a general sense of the types of things that people are interested in and where I might buy extra copies or sort of beef up that that area. People, I think a lot of adults enjoy reading YA, even they're not what young adult, but I think a lot of people do. And so I think like some of these give me an indication of that. And some of these are children's books, especially the children's books. I bet a lot of times the kids read those there with their parents and they don't necessarily check them out. Sometimes they do, but not always. But like our Rainbow and Hips on the Drag Queen and Go Swish Wish Wish are definitely children's books, and they've been checked out some of the most times. And then here's just another selection. I think this gets us into like they've been checked out at least 4 times. And then there's just like a whole giant list of things that have been checked out once or twice. Currently, I'm working with the Appalachian Liberation Library that's up in Johnson City, and the Children's Diversity and Justice Library, which is here in Knoxville at the Unitarian Universalist Church. And we're writing an article on sort of how we're making diversity related books available to the community. And so we're working on that. So hopefully that'll be in like Tennessee Libraries Journal soon, you know, like one day. So you can read that if you're interested. And I currently have a UT student intern who was interested in getting involved. So in the past, I've had practicum students, and so yeah, so that's a little bit about what we're doing currently. And then as far as, you know, assessment, whenever I go to South Press, I always see people sort of browsing and looking at books or checking books out and stuff like that. So that does my heart good. And then this is really neat. We had a family who adopted a trans son recently, and this is the text that I got from them. The parent said, "Tiny human doesn't read, but sure love the bookshelf." And they took a book home too. So, and they sent me this picture. So like that, you know, to me, that's all worth it right there. More than like numbers of books checked out or how many books do you have total. Like, it's just about like, again, like that one book for that one reader, you know, is what really is the why of why I do things. And so I have time for questions, or I'll just, I guess, briefly, I can show you the back end of those systems, or like.
I have a really quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the library is not registered as anything, right? Like it's still just like a project, not so much. I guess like a nonprofit is what I'm trying to ask. Like, is it registered as a nonprofit? Are you interested in ever getting it registered?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would, especially like if I ever, you know, wanted to do like a do fundraising or like write a grant or something. I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
what I was thinking about, is if it
um,
was a nonprofit, you could like get
um,
some grants in your work.
definitely, yeah, at that, maybe in the future, like so far, I feel like I've been able to sort of manage it through the resources that I've had. And there's been some pros to that. The pro is that I'm sort of able to do with the money, like there's no strings attached, right? And
Yeah.
then also um, I'm able to sort of like make statements on our social media and stuff. Like if I want to say like um, what folks are doing with banning books is really wrong, like I don't have to like think about like, am I going into like a political area? Am I like working within the guidelines of a particular grant funder or things like that? So there's been some freedom in that, but at some point, and then also like um, just as far as like legitimacy, like it's always, it's always nice to be able to say like, oh, this is a true nonprofit, like we do this. And definitely I think like um, if I were to bring folk, like so far it's just been like practicum students or volunteers, but if I wanted to formalize it, like with having a board or an executive committee, like I think a nonprofit would really make sense. So that's a great question. Yeah,
Cool.
thank you. Any other questions?
I have another
Yeah,
quick one.
yeah,
So when you first started talking about what was in the collection, it was like fiction and nonfiction. I was like, okay, so it's just like prose, like written like books. And then you mentioned specifically graphic novels, and that was what I was going to ask about. So I'm glad that you already mentioned it. Because like that's been a big thing for me. Like that's generally the type of like fun literature now that I'm in school, like the fun literature that I read. So like what would be the makeup of like how much of the collection is like prose, poetry, and then how much of it would be like the graphic novels? Because like I know that sort of world a lot better than the like prose
right.
LGBTQ like collection. Mhm.
It's tiny so far because so
Okay.
far it's just been, I would say it's about half of a shelf. If you look behind me, that's a picture. So it's about
Uh-huh.
half of a shelf of graphic novels, but definitely um, that's one of the things that we get requests for.
Mhm.
And so I think um, that's what I'm gonna, like when I do have money to buy things, I would buy more YA stuff and more graphic novels.
Mhm.
Because I think yeah, I just think it's a way that people are reading these days for sure. And the DVDs again, like those are things that were sort of gifted to us. I don't actively purchase DVDs, and I'm not even sure if people still use DVDs, if they have DVD players. But or I guess some people have an external DVD that they can use with their computer. Um, but it's interesting thinking about sort of the shift to streaming video and ebooks and audiobooks, and all of those things aren't possible with a library like ours, right? With the increased licensing around all of those things, it makes it hard to hand from person to person and get really more than one use or more than one user out of those. And so um, I don't know where we'll go with that, but for now, um, we were told 20 years ago that everything's going electronic, like no one will ever read print again. And I think people still read print. I think they've just added to this, like people reprint and they listen to audiobooks and they read ebooks, you know.
Mhm.
And so so luckily I feel like the print books still have a place, and it's what we're able to sort of loan and use. So great question. Yeah. If you have, since you, that's your area of specialty, if you have recommendations, like let
I
me
have
know.
so many, Donna. Do not worry. I will send you an email after this. It will
Yeah,
be like
yeah.
30 or 50 books. It's like everything that's on my bookshelves. So
Oh, cool,
I
cool.
got you. Don't worry.
Good, good.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
I guess another question. So you have the 3 locations now, and then I also saw that you had like storage. Like,
mm.
is that just like your house? Like,
Yeah, that's
I
just,
would assume.
yeah. I mean, my thought was in the beginning, since the shelf was so tiny in the beginning, you know, like my thought was, well, if people see something in the catalog that they want, they could email me and sort of like I'll do like a Library Express or whatever, document delivery to them. But yeah, just storage location helps me keep track of where things are. And if somebody happens to see something in there that they, you know, that isn't at one of those locations, um, they can always request it. So yeah, my wife is always like, she's like, all you do is just like you bring books in, you bring books out. Like there's always like boxes of books in the house, either being processed or like getting ready to go to another location. That that reminds me that at the beginning of this year, I sort of refreshed the collection. So I took things from Bryant's Bridge and brought them to South Press and then swapped them out because I feel like, um, you know, the ones at South Press had been there for what, almost 3 years. And so,
Help with circulation. Yeah.
yeah. And
Mhm.
so, so yeah, so that's some of the things I've noticed that I'm more of a nonfiction person, so I like all the dorky like history things, and those don't circulate quite as well, and definitely um, older books um, don't circulate as well. So like things that were sort of super important, like books that were written in the 90s about AIDS or Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or things like that, that were really a big deal back then. Like it seems like folks aren't really quite interested in that, which I totally get. But they're there if anyone wants them. Yeah. What other questions do you have? I can also bring up like Voices Out Loud, which is our the queer history project, if you have any questions about that.
That sounds cool. Let's talk. I have another question, but we can if
Yeah,
you
go
want to
ahead.
talk. Okay. Do you have like ideas of where you would want like a fourth location to be? Like, has that been discussed at all? Or like, are you not looking to like well, kind of I'm just curious, like, is there talk like thought being put into like, well, can we go somewhere else?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the places, they just kind of presented themselves, right?
Mhm.
Like the Knox Pride Center in Bryant's Bridge didn't even exist when we opened originally. And like when those places, it's funny for like Bryant's Bridge, like I had sent them an email when I heard that they were going to have a house for um, queer young folks, and they sent me a message and like almost at the same time, and I was like, I have these books, like would they want some of these? And they were like, hey, we have these bookshelves. Like, don't you run that library? And so and the same thing with sort of like with Knox Pride, you know, like you know, they have this room and like there's just some space in there, and they were like, hey, like and so it was kind of like a mutual thing. I don't know, I think it would be super cool if yeah, I don't know if you have any ideas,
Hmm. I have to think
it's,
about it.
you know, I want it to be accessible, but also like not unwieldy or like, yeah. So
I think having it at a coffee shop would be like really ideal because some people don't have anything to do when they're like they get a coffee and
right,
they're like, oh, there's a bookshelf, let's check these out and like see what's going on. I think that's
right,
like a really like organic. I mean, that's why I would assume Hodges has Starbucks and they do so well. Like
yeah,
people like stay there for a long time doing
right.
work or reading. Um, so yeah, I was just curious if there was like just any ideas or like you want to keep pushing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with it, with where it is right now. But who knows what the future holds? So I like to just kind of be open and
Mhm.
also like flexible with things. And so, yeah, cool. So this is Voices Out Loud project that started in 2016. We're collecting oral histories, and we're also collecting like any kind of LGBTQ memorabilia artifacts that have to do with like life in Eastern Tennessee. So here's all of our oral histories. We have tons. Well, we shouldn't say tons. We have about 30 that are in process. These are the ones that are finished. So you can, they're audio. You can listen to them. It has a read-along transcript, or you can download the transcript. So that's oral histories. I'm keeping track of like all the things in the news. So I'm creating like a news archive. There's been a lot going on this year, folks. um, uh, the other thing that we have here is, so I'm trying to, I've worked with SLA students to scan and create metadata and things like this. And we're putting these, like this is the UTK gay group from the 90s, 80s, and 90s, putting their newsletters online and also like Daily Beacon articles, or there was a newspaper called Query in the 90s that was statewide. So putting that type of information up so that people have a better sense of their history and what's been going on in Tennessee and East Tennessee. And then, you know, trying to sort of, as events happen, it's so much easier to be collecting as things happen than to try and go back 20 years and be like, do you still have that flyer from the first like Southside Pride or whatever? So kind of trying to collect things as they happen. So videos, photographs, um, banners, flyers, all that, buttons, t-shirts, all that kinds of cool stuff. And all of the physical items will be held in special collections at UT Hodges, and and similarly, we're using UT Libraries to host our oral histories as well. So there's a little bit of a partnership there with the libraries, although we, yeah, so that's a little bit about Voices Out Loud project, where I've been kind of calling it Knoxville Core History just because, like, again, it's simpler. um, so yeah, questions about that or ideas, suggestions?
Yeah. So the oral histories, how does that work? Like, are they interviews that you and like your team, the people that you work with, conduct, or like are they self-submitted by people, that kind of thing?
I love the way y'all think. Yes, both. So most of these ones here are ones that we've conducted with that person, me or y'all probably know Kat, right? Kat
Me and
is
Matthew do.
my co-director, the co-director of Voices Out Loud. So we did these, but we're testing out this new method where basically we are working with a organization called Their Story. Now you can see. No, you see my background now. But anyway, it's a way for people to self record, and you can
Mhm.
set up prompts or questions for them to answer. So we've set up sort of these themes, and all they have to do, they can do it on their phone, iPad, or computer, and they just like record it, and then basically the recording just goes into our folder, and then we can take it from there. But we're trying to because not everyone wants to sit down and do an oral history. It's really involved. There's this, you have to sit down and talk with a person, or sometimes we do it through Zoom. But somebody might just say like, oh, I want to tell you this quick story about the first time I went to Pride, and so we're trying to do this, and this might be a way to be interactive, like when we set up at Pride events or other events, and just be like, hey, you have a minute and you want to submit a quick story. So we're testing that out.
So this is debuted, like in theory, I could submit something.
Yes, you could. It's
if I wanted
there.
to.
I would love to have testers as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting. So there's there's like some people in the community, like Mama Jean, like is sort of like she's passed now, but was like a big figure, and like almost everyone knows this person, and so we were trying to collect stories about them,
Yeah.
or just any of these other topics. So, but it's funny, I think a lot of times folks don't think that their story is important, or they think like, well, I'm not a big activist, or I'm not a big leader in the community. And I'm like, no, we want everyone's story. Like everyone makes up the community. And so it's just kind of convincing people that like, no, what you have to say matters and it's important. And so those
Yeah.
are a couple things. And so test it out, let me know,
I will.
and
This is
share
so
it.
cool.
Share it around
I've
with people.
I've done like several projects relating to oral histories this semester. And like to your point, I think it's like everyone's perspective matters. And like with that, it's really powerful hearing people talk about their lives like with their voices, and like if it's videotapes, seeing their face also, because it's like writing is obviously powerful, but there's something about like the whole human expression, and especially for queer people, like we're notoriously expressive with the way that we look. And as trends like move through our communities, it's really cool that that would like be documented visually in that way also. So this is really cool. I really like this
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. No, I fell in love with oral histories. Like I was like, if I wasn't a librarian, like I think that this is what I would have gone into, right? And transcribing people's stories is just amazing. Like you feel like you know them, and like yeah, it's just things that wouldn't be documented any other way. And you start to see like all these connections between people, the community, the place. And so yeah, we get the word out for us. And, so
I
yeah.
will be out in these streets telling people about this.
Cool. Yeah, and if y'all if any of you all are local or live in East Tennessee, like I have kind of like a saying, like see something queer, say something queer, share something queer, right? And so I want everyone to be like a queer archivist out there, like wherever you are, you see something, a poster, a flyer, even if you don't take it, like take a picture of it, because there's like we've been erased, we've been ignored, we've been actively like censored, in archives and in libraries and in public spaces. And so, you know, we're all out there, and so I just want to make sure that we sort of reverse that trend and start and document that we've always been here and we always will. We're not going anywhere, right? So so yeah, so join me in that. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you all so much for having me. This is cool, and best of luck to everyone in their librarian or information science career. You all young folks, new librarians make me hopeful. So keep doing the
Thank
good
you so
work.
much for coming.
Okay. Bye,
Yes, really,
y'all.
thank you so much. We're so happy to hear from you, and we'll share this out with everyone. Hopefully get some more voices in there.
Very cool. Okay.
Cool.
Bye-bye.